The airport was alive with its usual chaos. People rushed through the wide hallways, dragging suitcases behind them, checking their watches nervously, or scrolling on their phones while waiting for announcements over the loudspeakers. Among all this hustle and bustle stood a lonely piano, a black grand instrument tucked into a quiet corner of the terminal. It had been placed there years ago as part of some cultural initiative, but most days it went unnoticed. Occasionally, a child would bang out random notes, making giggly parents smile. Sometimes an amateur musician might sit down and play something simple like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But more often than not, the piano just sat there gathering dust. Nearby, a young woman moved quietly with her mop bucket. She wasn't glamorous or flashy, just another face in the crowd at first glance. Her name was Clara, and she worked alongside her father, Enrique, who had been a janitor at the airport for over 2 decades. They lived a modest life together in a small apartment outside the city. Enrique worked hard to make ends meet, and Clara helped him clean the terminals during his shifts. Despite their struggles, they were close-knit, sharing laughter and stories even when times got tough. Clara had always loved music, though no one really knew it. When she was younger, Enrique used to tell her how she'd hum tunes from old radio songs, mimicking melodies perfectly without ever hearing them more than once. But growing up poor meant owning a piano or any musical instrument wasn't possible. Music remained a distant dream, buried under piles of responsibilities and bills. Still, whenever Clara passed by that public piano tucked away near Gate 17, she couldn't help but pause. Something about it pulled at her ertstrings. On slow mornings, when the terminal wasn't too crowded, Clara found herself standing near the piano longer than usual. She watched other people approach it, some clumsy beginners, others confident players, and wondered what it would feel like to press those keys herself. Could she do it? Would anyone care if she tried? These questions lingered in her mind. But fear held her back. What if she messed up? What if everyone laughed? But then came one fateful morning that changed everything. It started like any other day. Clara arrived early with her father, ready to clean before the rush of travelers began. As she pushed her mop across the tiled floor, she noticed the piano again. This time, however, something felt different. Maybe it was the way sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting golden reflections on the polished wood of the piano. Or maybe it was the quiet stillness around her, the kind you only get in airports before dawn. Whatever it was, Clara felt drawn to the piano in a way she never had before. Hesitantly, she set her mop aside and walked toward it. Her heart raced as she sat down on the bench. The cool leather creaked beneath her weight, and she stared at the keys in front of her. They looked so delicate yet powerful, like tiny ivory doors waiting to unlock hidden worlds. For a moment, she thought about getting up and walking away. After all, what business did someone like her have sitting at a piano? Then, almost instinctively, her fingers hovered above the keys. Trembling slightly, she pressed down gently. A single note rang out, clear and pure, cutting through the silence. Encouraged by the sound, she pressed another key, then another. Before she knew it, her hands were moving faster, finding patterns and rhythms she didn't know existed within her, and suddenly something extraordinary happened. A melody burst forth, rich and flowing, filling the empty space around her. Notes cascaded like waterfalls, each one perfectly placed. Passengers nearby stopped mid-stride, turning to look at the source of the unexpected music. Some dropped their bags. Others froze completely, eyes widening in disbelief. Clara played. As if possessed, her fingers flying across the keyboard with precision and grace far beyond her experience. What made it even more astonishing was the piece itself. Chopin's Etude Op. 10 No. 4. Anyone familiar with classical music would recognize it instantly, a notoriously difficult etude known for its rapid arpeggios and technical demands. Yet here was Clara, playing it flawlessly, as though she'd practiced it for years. For the few minutes it took to finish the piece, the entire terminal seemed to hold its breath. Strangers exchanged glances, unsure whether they were witnessing magic or madness. When the final chord echoed through the air, silence followed for a brief second. Then came applause, loud, thunderous applause. People clapped wildly, cheering and whistling. Some even pulled out their phones to record videos. Eager to capture the moment, Clara blinked, snapping out of her trance-like state. She looked around, bewildered by the sudden attention. Her cheeks flushed red, and she quickly rose from the bench, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or run away. How had she done that? Where had this skill come from, and why did it feel so natural, like breathing? As she stepped back into the shadows, clutching her mop like a lifeline, one thing became clear: nothing would ever be the same again. The applause didn't stop right away. It swelled like a wave, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each passing second. Clara stood frozen near the piano, her mop still clutched tightly in one hand as if it were the only thing keeping her. Grounded, her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her ears, drowning out some of the cheers and whistles coming from the crowd around her. She had no idea what to do next. Should she bow, smile, run back to her cleaning cart and pretend nothing happened? People began to gather closer, forming a loose circle around the piano. Some clapped rhythmically, urging her to play another piece. Others simply stared in awe, whispering to each other about what they had just witnessed. "Did you see that?" One traveler said to his companion. "She played like a professional." Another woman held her phone up high, trying to get a better angle for her video. "This is going viral," she muttered under her breath. Clara felt overwhelmed. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. In fact, most days she preferred staying invisible, blending into the background while she worked alongside her father. But now, everyone's eyes were on her, strangers who didn't know anything about her life, yet seemed captivated by this sudden display of talent. Her father, Enrique, was among the spectators too. He had been mopping nearby when he heard the music start. At first, he thought someone famous must have sat down at the piano. Concert pianist passing through, or maybe a local musician showing off their skills. But when he realized it was Clara playing, his jaw dropped. He leaned against his mop handle, completely stunned. How could his daughter, who had never taken a single lesson, produce such breathtaking music? It didn't make sense for Clara. The experience was surreal. As the applause continued, memories started flooding back to her, vivid fragments of dreams she'd had but never paid much attention to before. In these dreams, she was always sitting at a piano, her fingers dancing effortlessly over the keys. The melodies came naturally, as though they were already inside her, waiting to be released. Now, standing here in the middle of an airport terminal, surrounded by strangers, those dreams suddenly felt real. But why? Where had this ability come from? Was it possible she'd been born with it, hidden deep within her all along? Or was there something else, something she couldn't explain, that had unlocked this part of herself? Before she could think too much about it, a man stepped forward from the crowd. He looked older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He carried himself with an air of authority, dressed in a crisp suit despite the early hour. "Excuse me," he said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the lingering applause. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I have to ask Carr." "You a trained musician?" Clara shook her head quickly, feeling her face grow even hotter. "No, sir," she stammered. I've never played before, not really." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Never played before?" he repeated. "Young lady, forgive me, but what you just did doesn't happen by accident. That etude you performed, it's incredibly challenging. Most professionals spend years mastering it." Clara opened her mouth to respond, but found she had no words. How could she explain something she didn't understand herself? Instead, she just shrugged helplessly and glanced toward her father, hoping he might offer some kind of support. Enrique gave her an encouraging nod, though he looked just as confused as everyone else dot by now. The crowd had grown even larger. Passengers who had been rushing to catch flights slowed down to see what all the commotion was about. Some even missed their boarding calls entirely, too mesmerized by the scene unfolding before them to care. A few kids tugged on their parents' sleeves, asking if the girl at the piano was some kind of superhero. Eventually, the man in the suit introduced himself. His name was Dr. Hartley, and he explained that he was a retired music professor visiting the city for a conference. He had recognized elements of Clara's technique immediately and wanted to learn more about her. "If you're willing," he added cautiously, "I'd love to speak with you further. There are certain things we might need to explore." Clara hesitated. She didn't know this man, and the idea of being studied or analyzed made her uncomfortable. Still, there was something genuine in his tone, a mix of curiosity and respect that put her at ease. After a moment, she nodded shyly. "Okay," she said softly. "We can talk." As the crowd began to disperse, many people lingered long enough to thank Clara for the performance. Some offered kind words of encouragement. Others asked if she planned to pursue music professionally. One elderly woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "Your playing reminded me of my late husband," she said gently. "He loved Chopin. Thank you for bringing him back to me, even if just for a moment." Clara listened to each comment quietly, nodding politely but unsure how to respond. Deep down, she felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. On one hand, it was thrilling to know she had touched people in such a profound way. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that none of this belonged to her, that somehow she was borrowing a gift meant for someone else. When the terminal finally returned to its usual rhythm, Clara went back to work, resuming her duties as if nothing unusual had happened. But she couldn't stop thinking about the morning's events. Every time she passed the piano, she glanced at it nervously, half expecting it to summon her again. And every time she saw her reflection in the shiny tiled floor, she wondered, "Who am I now?" Little did she know this was only the beginning of a journey that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her. The next few days were a blur for Clara. Word of her impromptu performance at the airport spread like wildfire. By the time she returned to work the following morning, reporters had already set up camp near Gate 17, hoping to catch another glimpse or sound of the mysterious janitor's daughter who could play like a prodigy. Cameras flashed as soon as she walked in, and microphones were thrust into her face before she even had a chance to grab her mop bucket. "Can you tell us how you learned to play like that?" one reporter asked eagerly. "What inspired you to sit down at the piano yesterday?" chimed in another. "Do you plan to pursue music professionally now?" Came yet another question. Clara felt overwhelmed all over again. She wasn't used to being interviewed or even talking about herself, and the barrage of questions left her tongue-tied. Her father, Enrique, stepped in to shield her from the chaos. He waved off the reporters with a firm but polite hand gesture. "Give her some space," he said firmly. "She's just here to do her job." But the media wasn't about to let go so easily. The story of the unknown cleaner-turned-pianist captured people's imaginations. Headlines popped up everywhere. Janitor's daughter stuns airport with masterpiece performance. From mop bucket to Mozart, meet the unlikely prodigy. And hidden talent discovered at Terminal 4. Social media buzzed with videos of Clara's performance, racking up millions of views overnight. Strangers commented on how inspiring it was, sharing stories of their own hidden dreams and untapped potential. Despite the whirlwind of attention, Clara tried to stay focused on her routine. She pushed her mop across the floors, wiped down benches, and emptied trash bins like she always did. But it was impossible to ignore the fact that things had changed. People recognized her now, not just travelers passing through the terminal, but coworkers, security guards, even airline staff. They smiled at her warmly or gave her thumbs up when they thought she wasn't looking. Some left encouraging notes, tucked under her cleaning cart handle. "You're amazing." Or, "Keep playing," even Enrique struggled to adjust. As proud as he was of his daughter, he couldn't help but feel uneasy about the sudden spotlight. For years, their life had been quiet and predictable, just the two of them against the world. Now, cameras followed them wherever they went, and strangers wanted to know every detail of their lives. Reporters kept asking him questions, too. Had Clara shown any musical talent growing up? Did she take lessons secretly? Was there a family history of musicians? "I don't know where this comes from," Enrique admitted during one particularly persistent interview. She hummed songs when she was little, sure, but nothing like That, he gestured toward the piano, which now sat surrounded by makeshift barriers to keep curious onlookers from touching it. We never had money for lessons or instruments. This is all new to both of us. Dr. Hartley, the retired music professor who had approached Clara after her performance, reached out again. He invited her to meet him at a nearby cafe to discuss what had happened. Clara agreed reluctantly, still unsure whether she trusted him or anyone else, for that matter. When she arrived, Dr. Hartley greeted her warmly and ordered them both coffee. Then he got straight to the point. "Clara," he began, leaning forward slightly, "what you demonstrated at the airport isn't normal." "Not in the conventional sense, anyway. There's something extraordinary going on here, and I think I might have an explanation." Clara stiffened. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "Well," Dr. Hartley explained, choosing his words carefully, "there's a phenomenon known as acquired savant syndrome. It's incredibly rare, but essentially, it happens when someone suddenly develops remarkable abilities, often artistic or mathematical, after a significant neurological event. Things like head injuries, strokes, or even certain types of seizures can trigger it. In your case, based on what you've described, it's possible that something similar occurred without you realizing it." Clara frowned, trying to process what he was saying. "So, you're saying my brain somehow rewired itself? And that's why I can play like that?" "It's a theory," Dr. Hartley replied. "I'd need to run some tests to confirm it." "Of course, but if this is true, it would explain why you're able to perform such complex pieces despite having no formal training. Your mind has unlocked a latent ability, a kind of genius, that was always there, waiting to be discovered." The idea sounded almost too strange to believe. Clara thought back to her childhood, searching for any clues that might support Dr. Hartley's theory. Had she ever hit her head hard enough to cause damage, fallen off a swing, or tripped down the stairs? Nothing stood out. Still, the more she listened, the more it made sense. How else could she account for the vivid dreams she'd had? The ones where she played intricate melodies on pianos she'd never touched? Maybe her brain had been preparing her for this moment all along. After their meeting, Clara agreed to undergo further testing. Over the next week, she visited hospitals and research facilities, undergoing scans and evaluations designed to map out her brain activity. The results confirmed Dr. Hartley's suspicions. Clara's neural pathways had indeed undergone significant changes. While scientists couldn't pinpoint exactly when or why these changes had occurred, they concluded that her newfound talent was likely a result of acquired savant syndrome. When Enrique heard the news, he was both amazed and worried. "Does this mean she's different now?" he asked Dr. Hartley anxiously. "Will she change?" Dr. Hartley reassured him. "Not necessarily. Acquired savant syndrome doesn't alter someone's personality or character. It simply enhances specific abilities. Clara is still the same person she's always been: hardworking, kind, humble. The only difference is that she now has access to a gift most of us can only dream of." For Clara, the diagnosis brought a mix of relief and confusion. On one hand, it answered some of the questions swirling in her mind. On the other hand, it raised new ones. What was she supposed to do with this gift? Should she embrace it fully, or try to keep living the way she always had? And most importantly, how could she stay true to herself while navigating this unexpected turn in her life? As the days passed, opportunities began pouring in. Concert halls invited her to perform. Record labels offered recording contracts. Prestigious conservatories extended scholarships, eager to nurture her raw talent. Everyone seemed to want a piece of her, but Clara wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. All she knew was that whatever path she chose, it had to honor not just her newfound abilities, but also the values and relationships that had shaped her into the person she was today. And deep down, she hoped that somewhere along the way she'd find answers to the biggest question of all. Why had this happened to her? The offers kept coming, one after another, each more tempting than the last. Clara's inbox was flooded with emails from concert organizers, record producers, and even television shows eager to feature her story. Some promised fame. Others dangled opportunities for wealth or global recognition. It was overwhelming, like standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump into the unknown or stay firmly planted on solid ground. At first, Clara tried to ignore it all. She continued working alongside her father, mopping floors and emptying trash bins as though nothing had changed. But no matter how hard she tried to cling to normalcy, the world outside refused to let her be. Strangers stopped her in the terminal, asking for autographs or selfies. Local newspapers ran profiles about her, calling her the airport prodigy. Even Enrique found himself fielding questions from curious coworkers who wanted to know if Clara planned to quit her job and pursue music full-time. One evening, after a long shift, Clara sat down with her father over a simple dinner of rice and beans. The kitchen table was cluttered with mail letters from promoters, invitations to prestigious events, and glossy brochures showcasing grand concert halls. Enrique picked up one of the envelopes, turning it over in his hands thoughtfully. "You've got a big decision to make," he said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm but tinged with concern. "This is your chance to do something amazing, Clara, something you might never get again." Clara sighed, pushing her food around on her plate. "I don't know what to do, Dad," she admitted softly. "All these people want me to play for them, to perform like I'm some kind of star, but that's not who I am. I'm just me." Enrique reached across the table and placed a hand over hers. "You'll always be my daughter," he said firmly. "No amount of concerts or cameras can change that. But this gift, it's special. Maybe it's meant for something bigger than us." Clara looked at him, searching his face for reassurance. She wanted so badly to believe him, to trust that stepping into the spotlight wouldn't mean losing herself or her connection to him. Yet doubt lingered in the back of her mind. What if fame pulled her away from everything she loved? What if she became someone unrecognizable, swallowed whole by expectations? To complicate matters further, their relationship began to feel strained. Enrique worked tirelessly to support Clara throughout her childhood, sacrificing his own dreams so she could have a better life. Now, as doors opened for her that he could never imagine walking through himself, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. He masked it well, putting on a brave smile whenever reporters asked about her success, but Clara saw through the cracks late at night when she caught him staring out the window or flipping idly through old photo albums. She knew he was struggling too. "I don't want to leave you behind," Clara told him one day, tears brimming in her eyes. "Everything I am, I owe to you. If I go down this road, will we still have each other?" Enrique hugged her tightly, his voice thick with emotion. "You'll never lose me, sweetheart. No matter where this takes you, I'll always be here. Just promise me one thing. Don't forget where you came from." That conversation stayed with Clara as she weighed her options. She realized she didn't have to choose between her past and her future. They weren't mutually exclusive. Slowly, an idea began to form in her mind. What if she could find a way to honor both? To embrace her newfound talent without abandoning the life and values that defined her? Her decision surprised everyone. Instead of quitting her job or moving to a fancy conservatory, Clara announced that she would continue working as a janitor, at least for now. During the day, she'd clean the airport terminals just like before. At night, she'd practice the piano, honing her skills under the guidance of Dr. Hartley, who agreed to mentor her free of charge. On weekends, she accepted select performance invitations, choosing small community events over glitzy galas. Each time she played, she dedicated the music to her father. Thanking him publicly for his sacrifices and unwavering support, the response was mixed. Some praised her humility, calling her a role model for staying grounded despite her meteoric rise. Others criticized her choice, insisting she was wasting her potential by clinging to a menial job. One online commenter wrote, "Why would someone with such extraordinary talent waste their time cleaning floors?" The comment stung, but Clara brushed it off. She knew who she was, and that was enough. As weeks turned into months, Clara grew more confident in her abilities. Under Dr. Hartley's tutelage, she expanded her repertoire, tackling pieces by composers like Rachmaninoff, Debussy, and Liszt. Her technique improved dramatically, but what truly set her apart was the emotion she poured into every note. Whether she was playing a soft, mournful adagio or a fiery, fast-paced etude, listeners felt as though they were hearing not just music, but her heart. Her performances became legendary within the local community. People lined up hours in advance to hear her play, packing auditoriums and spilling into overflow rooms. Afterward, they waited patiently to speak with her, sharing stories of how her music had moved them. A young boy told her he wanted to learn piano because of her. An elderly woman confessed that one of Clara's concerts had helped her cope with the loss of her husband. These moments reminded Clara why she had chosen this path, not for fame or fortune, but to connect with others. In a way only music could. Still, there were challenges. Balancing work and practice wasn't easy, especially when exhaustion set in. There were days when her fingers felt heavy, refusing to cooperate during rehearsals. Other times, self-doubt crept in, whispering cruel lies about how she didn't belong in the same league as trained musicians. But whenever she faltered, she remembered her father's words. "Don't forget where you came from." They anchored her, reminding her that her journey wasn't just about success, it was about staying true to herself. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Clara returned to the airport to finish her shift. As she pushed her mop cart down the familiar hallway, she noticed a crowd gathering near the public piano. Curious, she approached cautiously, wondering if another performer had taken her place. To her surprise, she saw Enrique sitting on the bench, tentatively pressing the keys. "Dad?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "What are you doing?" He grinned sheepishly. "Thought I'd give it a try," he said. "You're always talking about how music makes you feel alive. Figured it was time I gave it a shot." Clara laughed, pulling up a chair beside him. For the next hour they played together, her guiding his hands, him laughing at his mistakes. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. In that moment, surrounded by the hum of the terminal and the distant echo of travelers' footsteps, they found joy in simply being together. By embracing her roots while exploring new horizons, Clara discovered a harmony she hadn't known existed. Balance between who she was and who she was becoming. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, she faced it with courage, knowing that no matter what happened, she'd never walk it alone. Months passed, and Clara's life settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. She still woke up early to clean the airport terminals, her mop bucket clinking softly as she moved through the quiet halls before dawn. But now, when her shift ended, she'd head to a small practice room tucked away in the corner of the building, a space the management had generously offered her after hearing about her talent. There, surrounded by stacks of sheet music and the faint hum of planes taking off outside, she'd lose herself in hours of practice. The piano became her sanctuary, a place where she could pour out everything she felt but couldn't put into words. Her performances grew more frequent, too. Local churches invited her to play during Sunday services. Community centers hosted recitals where families brought their children to listen wide-eyed as her fingers danced across the keys. Each time she stepped onto a stage, no matter how modest, Clara reminded herself why she was there, to share something beautiful with others, not to prove anything to herself or the world. Her humility resonated deeply with audiences, earning her even more admiration than flashy displays of skill ever could. But the highlight of her journey came on a crisp autumn morning when the airport announced a special event, a live concert, featuring none other than Clara herself. It was an unusual choice for a venue most musicians performed in grand concert halls or elegant theaters, but it made perfect sense to Clara. After all, this was where her story had begun. This was the place where forgotten melodies had found their way back to her. The day of the concert arrived, and the terminal buzzed with excitement. Travelers lingered longer than usual, postponing flights just to catch a glimpse of the woman everyone was talking about. Rows of chairs were set up near Gate 17, facing the same public piano that had once sat neglected in the corner. Employees wore badges printed with Clara's Day in bold letters, and banners hung from the ceiling celebrating her journey. For once, the airport wasn't just a transit hub, it was a stage, Alive with anticipation. As Clara prepared backstage, she felt a mix of nerves and gratitude. Dr. Hartley had helped her select pieces for the program, striking a balance between technical brilliance and emotional depth. She'd chosen works by Chopin, Liszt, and Debussy, along with a few modern compositions that spoke to her personally. But one piece stood out above the rest: Liszt's La Campanella, a dazzling showpiece known for its rapid runs and intricate fingerwork. It was challenging, yes, but also exhilarating, a testament to how far she'd come since that first impromptu performance months ago, when it was finally time to take the stage. Clara walked out to thunderous applause. Dressed simply in a navy blue dress, she looked every bit the humble janitor's daughter she'd always been. Yet there was something different about her now, a quiet confidence, a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. As she approached the piano, she scanned the crowd and spotted her father standing near the edge, dressed in his uniform. He gave her a proud nod, his expression soft but steady, as if to say, "You've got this." Clara took a deep breath and sat down at the bench. The moment her fingers touched the keys, the noise around her faded into silence. Notes spilled forth like sunlight breaking through clouds, each one carrying fragments of her story. There was joy in the bright, cascading scales, longing in the tender, lingering chords, triumph in the powerful crescendos. She played not just for the audience, but for herself, for every dream she'd dared to chase, every doubt she'd overcome, every memory that had shaped her. When she reached the final section of La Campanella, the energy in the room shifted. People leaned forward in their seats, holding their breath as her hands moved faster and faster, weaving together notes so seamlessly it seemed impossible. Then, with a flourish, she struck the last chord, letting it ring out until it dissolved into silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. And then the applause erupted, louder and more heartfelt than anything Clara had ever experienced. Tears streamed down faces in the audience. Strangers hugged each other, overwhelmed by the beauty they'd witnessed. A little girl sitting on her mother's lap clapped wildly, shouting, "She's magic!" Behind the scenes, Enrique wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his uniform, beaming with pride. After the concert, Clara addressed the crowd, her voice trembling slightly but filled with sincerity. "I want to thank all of you for being here today," she began. "This journey hasn't been easy, but it's taught me so much, not just about music, but about myself. I used to think my gift came out of nowhere, like some kind of miracle. But now I realize it didn't. It came from love, from the sacrifices my dad made for me, from the kindness of strangers who believed in me, and from the hard work I've done every single day of my life." She paused, glancing toward Enrique. "People keep asking me how I can still clean floors while playing concerts. To them, it doesn't make sense. But to me, it does. Because this is who I am. My hands may have learned to play piano, but they're still the same hands that scrubbed these tiles and emptied these trash bins. That's what keeps me grounded. That's what reminds me of where I came from and why I'll never stop working hard." Her words brought another wave of applause, followed by cheers and whistles. As the crowd dispersed, many people stayed behind to congratulate her personally. Some shared stories of their own struggles, thanking her for inspiring them to keep going despite the odds. Others simply shook her hand, saying nothing but smiling warmly, as if to convey what words couldn't. In the days that followed, Clara's story continued to spread. News outlets covered the concert, highlighting not just her musical talent, but her determination to stay true to herself. Social media lit up with messages of support, with hashtags like #ClaraKeepsItReal trending worldwide. Even critics who had once dismissed her choices praised her authenticity, calling her a rare gem in a world obsessed with perfection. Yet, amidst all the attention, Clara remained unchanged. She returned to her routine, cleaning floors during the day and practicing late into the night. Whenever someone asked if she planned to leave her job for good, she smiled and shook her head. "Why would I?" she'd reply. "This place is part of me. So is my dad. Without them, I wouldn't be here." And perhaps that was the most remarkable thing about Clara, not the speed of her fingers or the complexity of the pieces she played, but the way she carried herself. She didn't see success as a destination. She saw it as a journey, one that allowed her to honor her roots while reaching for the stars. Years later, when travelers passed through the airport, they'd often pause by the public piano. Some remembered the day Clara played her unforgettable concert. Others noticed the plaque mounted nearby, engraved with a simple message, dedicated to Clara, whose music reminded us that greatness begins with staying true. Every time Clara walked past that plaque, she smiled. Not because it bore her name, but because it captured the essence of her journey, the harmony she'd found between who she was and who she'd become. And though her future remained unwritten, one thing was certain. Wherever life took her next, she'd carry that harmony with her, note by note.